Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring something absolutely incredible. Think about it for a second. The last time you went shopping for clothes, did you just look at them hanging there? No way. You immediately reached out and touched them, right? And that's because clothing isn't just seen, it is felt. So today, we are going to decode the secret language of texture in fashion and really uncover how the things we wear become a full-on sensory experience.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining what texture actually is, compare visual and tactile textures, and explore a bunch of different fabrics. Then we'll get into the magic of light, color, and silhouette, cover some creation techniques, and finally wrap up with how professionals observe all of this.
Section 1. What is texture? The foundation of feel.
Have you ever looked at a piece of clothing and just instantly knew exactly how it would feel against your skin? Like you know whether it's going to be silky soft or incredibly rough before you even lay a finger on it? Well, that intuition is based entirely on texture. Simply put, texture is the surface quality of a material. It's completely determined by that outer layer, how the yarns are woven or knitted together, and how it literally feels to the touch. Honestly, it's the magic element that transforms a flat, 2D design into a physical, sensory experience. And it dictates absolutely everything, from a garment drape, how it actually falls in the body, to what occasion it's even suitable for. A design made in flowing silk feels and behaves entirely differently than that exact same design made in stiff denim. Moving on to Section 2, Visual versus Tactile Texture, the Illusion and the Reality.
In the fashion industry, professionals basically divide texture into two highly distinct categories, and this is a really crucial difference. Visual texture is all about the illusion. It's identified only by sight. Think of a realistic 3D floral print, or maybe a printed gingham check. The fabric might visually pop, looking raised or super textured to the eye, but if you close your eyes and run your hand over it, it feels completely flat. On the flip side, we have tactile texture. This is identified by physical touch. This is the literal roughness of woven jute, or that incredible soft fuzz of velvet right under your fingertips. It's the absolute physical reality of the fabric surface.
All right, Section 3, Fabrics and Textures, the Fabric Sandbox. Welcome to the Sandbox. This is where we get to explore the raw materials of fashion and see how different weaves and natural fibers create completely unique sensory profiles. Let's do a rapid-fire run-through these tactile categories. We've got delicate, smooth, and slippery materials like silk and satin that just whisper and glide through your hands. Then there's rough and grainy, like rustic jute or the fine grains of georgette. We have soft, breathable cotton and flannel. Crisped fabrics that actually stand up on their own with a bit of a rustle, like organza. We have fuzzy and hairy materials. Think of a cozy mohair sweater or thick faux fur. There's raised and embossed textures like rich brocade. Rib textures with those raised parallel lines like a sturdy, heavy corduroy. And nubby textures that are just full of little knots like a classic tweed jacket. Now, what's really interesting about seeing all these properties side by side is how a fabric's visual and tactile traits totally dictate its end use. Look at cotton. It's flat, matte, and soft, which makes it lightweight and perfect for casual wear. But drop down to denim. It has a visible twill pattern, it's rough and incredibly stiff to the touch, has zero shine, and is very heavy, which makes it perfect for rugged jackets and jeans. Now compare that heavy denim to organza. Organza is sheer and lightweight, but wonderfully crisp and structured, so it holds its shape beautifully for something like a ball gown. Or velvet, which is heavy, soft, and fuzzy with this unique directional shine that makes it ideal for rich party wear. You see, every single fabric has its own specific recipe of shine, weight, and feel.
Section 4. Light, color, and silhouette. The Illusionist Toolkit.
So far, we've just talked about the fabric on its own, but external elements interact with texture to change absolutely everything. Lighting, for example, is a real game changer. A shiny surface, like satin, reflects light directly. It creates these bright, sharp highlights that give off a really luxurious, glamorous vibe. But a matte surface, like cotton, actually scatters and absorbs that light. It creates a calm, even, and highly subtle look. And this is exactly why a photographer literally has to change their entire lighting setup for a photo shoot. High-shine satin can easily get overexposed and blown out under bright, direct lights, whereas a matte cotton needs softer, more deliberate lighting just to show off its shape and depth. And, texture completely alters color, too. Color is never just color. If you put 4 different black fabrics next to each other, they are going to look like entirely different shades.
Black velvet looks incredibly deep, mysterious, and rich because those tiny fuzzy fibers absorb the light. Meanwhile, black satin looks bright, sleek, and highly reflective. This perfectly explains why a bridal or evening wear designer might deliberately choose velvet when they want the absolute richest, darkest black possible for a gown. And this brilliantly illustrates how texture actually controls the silhouette, the outer shape of the garment. You've got structured fabrics, right? These are stiff, like organza. They hold their own shape to create voluminous, defined silhouettes. Then you have fluid fabrics. These are soft, like chiffon. They drape, flow, and cling closely to the body. Just imagine an identical A-line skirt design. If you sew it in stiff organza, it's going to puff out, looking massive and structured. But if you sew that exact same design in flowing chiffon, it will drape softly against the legs, creating a romantic, breezy silhouette. In fashion, the fabric literally is the shape.
Section 5. Creation Techniques. Mastering the Craft. Sometimes a designer wants a specific texture that just doesn't naturally exist, right? So they have to manipulate flat materials. Let's look at structural manipulations. This is where you actually change the physical architecture of the cloth. We've got pleating, which creates structured volume through neat set folds. Gathering pulls threads to create soft, irregular volume. Ruffles are gathered strips added for 3D wavy movement. Smocking uses embroidery to create this stretchy honeycomb-like texture. Quilting, well, actually it's more like sandwiching padded layers between fabric for 3D warmth. And general surface manipulation involves twisting and tucking the fabric into sculptural shapes. These techniques completely change both the visual depth and the tactile feel of the fabric. But a quick warning here, you have to match the technique to the fabric's weight. If you try putting gathered ruffles on a heavy, stiff fabric like thick denim, it's just going to look super bulky and completely lose its movement. Then we have surface additions. Instead of folding the fabric itself, you add things to it to create an embellishment texture. This includes embroidery with detailed threads, applique, which is where you sew distinct fabric shapes onto a base layer, intricate beading, rows of shiny sequins, lace insertion for beautiful mixed sheer panels, and fabric layering for incredible multi-texture depth. But again, it is all about balance and logic. A super common mistake is putting incredibly heavy, dense beadwork or embroidery onto a really delicate, lightweight fabric. Those heavy additions, they will just drag, stretch, and eventually tear the delicate base right apart.
Okay, Section 6, Professional Observation, the Designer Method.
This is where we get into the practical application. Let's talk about how you can analyze a piece of fabric just like an industry professional. Here's the condensed method, and honestly, the absolute golden rule here is always look first, touch second. Step 1 is the visual check. Before you even lay a finger on the cloth, look closely at the overall surface, any patterns, prints, and how it reflects light. Step 2 is the tactile check. Now you run your hands over it to physically feel for softness, roughness, or that crisp stiffness. Step 3 is the weight and fall assessment. You judge how heavy the fabric is right in your hands and how it naturally drapes or falls. And finally, Step 4, design application. You categorize the tactile texture and determine what specific garment it's actually suitable for based on everything you just observed.
Next up, common mistakes and harmonious design.
Let's make sure we avoid some of those classic amateur pitfalls, okay? Because applying what we've learned is key. Here are some really common beginner mistakes to watch out for. First off, absolutely do not assume a dark color means a specific texture. Black cotton is very, very different from black velvet. Don't think a visual 3D print will actually feel raised to the touch. Remember the difference between visual and tactile. Avoid confusing shiny surfaces with smooth ones. A fabric like brocade is incredibly shiny but actually feels quite grainy and raised when you touch it. Never equate a fabric's heavy weight with a rough texture. Remember, velvet is super heavy, but it is incredibly soft and fuzzy. And lastly, don't assume a visual pattern, like a printed grade of checks, actually changes the flat surface feel. So, the crucial point we need to hit here is the rule of balance. A truly spectacular garment almost never relies on just one single texture. Professional collections harmoniously layer multiple textures to create visual interest and really clear focal points. Think of a stunning bridal collection, for instance. It might combine a main texture, like a rich velvet base for the skirt, with a supporting texture, like a smooth silk lining against the skin for pure comfort, and accent textures, like layers of crisp net, to add structured volume without adding too much weight. It's just a beautifully orchestrated harmony.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to take away today. Whether you are designing, analyzing, or honestly even just shopping for your next signature garment, how will you combine visual and tactile textures to make your audience truly feel your vision? Remember, fashion isn't just about what meets the eye, it's about the entire sensory experience. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope you never look at or touch a